I do have this sort of comical, well, what about this other thing? Whatever, just like, I basically love all of my children equally, you know what I mean? But we definitely have, for Sloan, we definitely have records that people love, and then some that are, we have 12 full-length records, and I think there are some that are consistently in the bottom 2 or 3, and whatever, it makes sense and it's fine.
Obviously, if you have 10 records, you're going to have your own personal hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And is it the sense that your relationship to them has kind of soured over time, or was it clear at the moment that they just weren't your best thing?
No, if anything, the one thing that I've learned, or like our first record, we have 12 records. Our first record was very of the time. It was very, using the language of shoegaze and grunge when it was already too late to the party. And but we immediately, for our second record, we wanted to get out of there. We thought it was like a burning house, or get us out of this indie rock club or whatever, like grunge club. Like, so many awful records are being made in this whatever genre. And so I didn't really like our first record for a couple of years, because I just felt it was so embarrassing and so du jour. I love it again because it is of the time, and I kind of like it. We made a concerted effort, starting with our second record, to make timeless music, when our first one is decidedly very 1992. But then the other thing is just the product of getting older. It's like, I really like this thing, people's favorite record, it just gets farther and farther away in time. It's just like, and then it's just like, and it's harder and harder to compete with it, because it's wrapped up in nostalgia and the way people felt about themselves back then and all that kind of stuff.
Being a rock musician who goes on tour, and obviously there's a certain amount of playing the hits, or playing fan favorites that you have to do, because if somebody's like coming out and paying to see you, like, you want to give them a little bit of what they want. But that relationship is so different from just about any other artist, in that I'm having trouble thinking of another medium where the artists who made something 30 years ago are forced to revisit it night in and night out.
I'm more interested, for example, in comedy. Like, if there's new comedy, I'm more interested in that than new music. Like, I don't care about new music anymore. I'm too old. I loved music. It changed my life, but it's harder and harder for me to. But with new comedy, like, I love the history of comedy as well, but I also love new comedy. But you often find, you probably know, like, musicians, I saw that you had Kevin McDonald on, and, musicians love comedians and comedians love musicians, but the way that they're polar opposite, or what they envy in each other is, a comedian would look to a musician and say, you get to sit back and play your hits. And I have to, but for a comedian, like, has to be new all the time. A musician would envy a comedian because it's like, I want to play all my new songs. I don't want to have to play all these old ones. And whereas a comedian would say, I don't want to have to write a whole new show. I want to just go out and play my greatest hits. Like, but if I don't write a whole new hour, I can't go back.
Were you chasing something on that first record? Does it sound of the era because you were trying to be of the era?
We were just, we didn't know anything else, but just, we liked My Bloody Valentine and that kind of thing. And we didn't expect to be playing outside of town. Like, we were just a local band. Like, hey, maybe we should make a band like that for our town, kind of thing. And then we got all these opportunities to play outside of town and outside of Canada. And then when you go to England and it's 1993 and you're copying the sound of My Bloody Valentine from 1988, it's kind of embarrassing. And it's like, let's do something else.
Well, it was that first record, or, really those early songs that got you signed to Geffen.
Yes. Yeah, we got signed pretty much right away. Like, we didn't do a lot before we got signed. We got really lucky. We were definitely in the time of Nirvana. Like, we were 22, 23 years old and starting to record, and had been in bands for years. In September 91, whenever basically the world came looking for people like us, and we were ready to go. Like, I joke that it's the last time I had any kind of opportunity was then. I've just been blowing on the ember of that opportunity for 30 years.
I understand and respect the impulse to not want to be chasing it. And you're right, especially because a lot of the I guess post grunge is the proper term, but a lot of the stuff that came after Nirvana was fourth, fifth generation pale imitation. But at the same time, there was a sound that got you that label. So actively pushing against that, is there a little bit of self-sabotage involved?
I don't know if it would be called self-sabotage. We really thought that we were really, always thinking of what would give us longevity. I really thought that doubling down and doing more grunge in 1994, we just thought it was just way too late. Even though it seemed to go on for years after that, like we were kind of, we made a pop record and our reference points were Fleetwood Mac, Rumors, and Plastic Ono Band, and it was still heavy grunge times, like all the sort of, what would they be, like Collective Soul and that kind of sort of like Pretenders stuff, Candlebox, and all that stuff was still happening. But as an investment in the long term, I still think it was the right thing to do. I mean, the guy who signed us to Geffen, his name's Todd Sullivan, and we were his first signing, and he was an underling mailroom guy. And then his next signing was Weezer. And then he went from being like this low man on the totem pole to the only, then there was a mass exodus, like all the A&R guys left Geffen. And then all of a sudden this mailroom guy was the only A&R guy with a million seller. It was the Weezer record. And they were really taking off as we were kind of hitting the skids. So don't mention them because they still boil my blood. I'm just
Weezer.
kidding. I'm just teasing.
The Blue Album, in a lot of ways, at least to me, and I guess my age and coming up when I did, it's kind of unimpeachable as a pop record. I mean, it's undeniable.
We like, as we were begging for $2,000 to make a video in somebody's backyard, I was at Todd Sullivan's house and he said, "Hey, you can have $2,000. Sure. Check out this new video for Buddy Holly." Like
Fonzie's in it.
And I was just like, I was basically in tears. I was like, we're dead. This is awesome. We always joked at the time that Weezer made our second record, and then our second record should have been our third record. We should have done it in that order, but we didn't. We actually didn't write those songs. But the first Weezer record's great.
It's interesting to hear you say that you were thinking about longevity, like at that early on in your career. You were a band, you just signed to a major label with, all of these other bands that were taking off at the time. Especially at that age, at that time, most people are really just sort of living in the moment. But you were thinking that far down the road?
We weren't 17. Like, I had already graduated from university. I wasn't a little kid. And we had been in bands.
But early 20s is still, fairly young.
Yes, but the whole time that we got signed, we were excited about it, but we were always preparing to be dropped. Like we ran our little record label at home to keep a foot in the local community and contribute locally, because we didn't play locally anymore, but also as a kind of an insurance policy to practice putting out records, because we figured we'd be back there. And sure enough, we were.
As you've spoken to your contemporaries and your peers who were in similar positions, were they all kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop at that point?
I don't know. We were the luckiest people we knew, like all of our friends' bands. I mean, we met Sebadoh, we met Weezer and stuff, but we didn't run with those guys. Our friends were in bands like Thrush Hermit, Eric's Trip, Jail, the Inbreds, the Local Rabbits, Hardship Post. Like,
these all bands that you eventually signed to your label.
Yeah, but those were our friends, and we were luckier than they were. We had a major label giving us some money and attention, but they all had jobs, and we were putting out their records and trying to run a utopian business on a sort of Bleach model. It's like, if you do a record with us and then you get a record deal with somebody, go ahead, and then we'll have your EP and we'll make money if you guys make money. But we just thought of it as a kind of farm team, and because we made our money doing something else, we didn't want to have contracts, we didn't want to hold anyone back, and all of those. Well, Hardship Post and Jail and Eric's Trip all went to Sub Pop, and Thrush Hermit were on Elektra in the States, and the Inbreds were on a label, a short-lived Atlantic subsidiary called Tag. Anyway, they all kind of got to taste a little bit of it. Played in the States, played in England and stuff. But anyway, I don't know what my point is, but I guess we were maybe forward thinking in that. I guess,
Pragmatic, I think, is probably the proper word, and I guess old enough and wise enough at the time to understand how this thing tends to go for bands.
Yeah. The other thing that we did was we decided, even though it was kind of my band, I knew all the guys and brought them together, and I was writing most of the songs, but we also decided from the outset to split everything equally, all of the songwriting, in an effort to keep everyone interested in the band. Now, I had played in a band where I was the young guy. I was 21 and they were 26, and they got a little record deal in Canada. And but when that broke up, I didn't care that much, because I didn't run that band. I just knew the feeling of I just wanted everyone to be invested, so that I didn't want to change members and all that kind of stuff. Like, I was, I've bent over backwards to try to show all four of our faces, and to show off that we all write and we all sing and we all share equally, and we're an exercise in democracy, for better or for worse.
For better or for worse is a good way of putting it. I talk to a lot of bands, and not all of them, but a majority of them have told me that to some degree it needs to be a little dictatorial, in that one person really needs to have the clear vision. And you hear all these stories, like there's that.
But when you're talking about somebody who feels that way, you're talking to the dictator. I mean, what do the other guys think? I'm joking, but but I think it should be dictatorial too. You should do what I say, of course. But then I'd lose my band. But
that's it, exactly. They think it should be dictatorial in the sense that, like, they
don't care who's in their band.
No, it's not even that at all. I'm talking people in bands that have, like, been together for a while. The sense is that, not dictatorial in that, like, somebody is, being a bad boss, but in the sense that one person kind of needs to have the clear vision. Because the example I always think of is, remember that Creedence record where they let everybody write the songs and it just it was a bit of a mess?
I don't know it specifically, but we've talked about it in the context of my band behaving the way it does. Yeah.
This hasn't been the case with Sloan, because it's 30 years this year.
But it is, but I can describe our band as just as big a mess. Like, we definitely have been accused of writing compilation style records that don't hang together and those kinds of things. And it never bothered me. I always thought, whatever. I always liked Revolver by the Beatles, which just sounds like a bunch of different bands. It just never bothered me. The idea of being accused of making a compilation style record, to me, just feels like a compliment that they don't know how to give. It's just like, otherwise it's just unidimensional, or like, I mean, I know there's a fine line in words you can use. Like, our least eclectic record, I think, is unidimensional, which is called Action Packed, where Andrew didn't write any songs and all of us tried to write songs of a certain type. And I thought it was an interesting experiment, but I just think it's kind of the least Sloan sounding record. It's the least eclectic, and it's among the most maligned.
I guess maybe the question is because I think we're mostly circling around songwriting, right? I mean, and that's what people tend to think of when they think about who is sort of in charge of the vision of a group. But is there a person who generally rallies the troops and says, hey, it's time to get back in the studio, or it's time to tour?
There is, but but he makes the same amount of money as everybody else.
To be clear, because we're not using the video, that was Chris.
Yeah, sorry, I'm pointing at myself. Yeah, but I think that, I mean, of songwriting, I think that in the same way that I don't believe it when people say certain people can do math and certain people can't. Like, I just think that everyone can do math, and did you get left behind? Because it's a cumulative thing. If you get left behind, then you feel like you can't do it. If you just have to know every step in order. I'm not a mathematician, but I think that anybody can write songs. And in our band, we encouraged everybody to do it. And I wrote the most at first. And then by our fifth record, we had complete equilibrium. And, we help each other, I guess. But we wanted to make it, again, as a deliberate, democratic exercise to make it a place for everybody to contribute creatively. And sorry, we were just talking about Sebadoh. They did a similar thing. They were three, and they all wrote. Anyway, it is an experiment that can go badly, I guess, and perhaps it goes badly with us at times. But I just think that whatever. I'm really happy about the fact that we've done it. I think that it may have been sort of hard to sort of see what was going on with us at first because it was kind of disparate. But when you look at it from 30 years later, like, I think that every guy has their own kind of style, and I think there's a really cool asymmetrical balance that we have within the band. I'm more of a troop rallier, but Andrew is the most special musician, and Jay is the most finicky and wants to know about production and all that stuff. Patrick has generated the most money. If I really had been dictatorial, I would have been, I went out because I shared it with a guy who made more money from songwriting than I did.
You bet against yourself and it paid off.
Yes, exactly. So what I'm saying is
there's a big benefit for having been signed early on, in that has created, in a sense, the momentum that has carried you for the rest of your career. But I'm always interested in the trajectories of bands, and like beyond that, ultimately, do you think it has been good for the health of the band that like that sort of high point in terms of real popular mainstream popularity came early on?
I mean, a lot of people who make a great first record with lots of hype and everything don't get to make their second. A lot of people who have a great, good shot out of the cannon, and then they blow it the second time, or they take an emotional risk or a career risk. I guess I'm thinking of the Beastie Boys, and then their third record they kind of bounce back, and then everybody loves them for having. Even Weezer, I think, made the sort of the second record that kind of was a bomb or whatever, and then everybody goes back and it's the one that everybody loves so much. The true fans love that the most, even though like I there's part of me that's sort of cynical about that. It's like I love it the most because I can define myself by this thing that not everybody defines himself by. You know what I mean? When your favorite band becomes big, then it's like I liked them before, or I liked them when they were at their commercial nadir, whatever. I don't mean, that's just cynical talk. Yeah, we were lucky out of the gates. We kind of set ourselves up for, we were not dropped by Geffen. We were like fighting a lot in '94 and kind of wanted to break up. And Geffen, basically, we owed them 6 records. Like when you have a 6-record deal, it doesn't mean you get to make 6 records, although you might, but it just means that you can't walk for 6 records, if you're doing well. We owed them 5 records or 4 records or whatever, and but they let us go. They were super cool about it. Like everybody we met at Geffen, it's a corporation, but everybody we met there they kind of picked all the coolest people in the United States. Like it was like people who worked at SST, and it was. I don't have any complaints about that. But yeah, we set ourselves up, and we also have an interesting vantage point because we're from Canada, and being from Canada, we have enjoyed commercial success that we haven't continued to enjoy in the States. If you know about us in the States, it's because you were on a website or some nerd told you about us. Like nobody knows who we are. Like it's just music fans. But in Canada, we were on TV and the radio all through the late 90s, all through the 90s, and into the early 2000s. We were like a mainstream band. I don't mean from a sound point of view, but I just mean we benefited from mainstream media. And then we never really didn't in the States. So we kind of have 2 careers, one in Canada where we play at the Belleville Waterfront Festival with a bunch of other big Canadian bands. You don't probably even know who they are. And then we go to the States, and then we get to hang with Red Cross, and we look like we're a credible act,
Canada has these built-in triggers in the same way that, that you have socialized healthcare. You've also got pieces of the media. I mean, CanCon, right? Like that,
yes.
that is specifically designed to lift up Canadian acts.
Yes. And then within Canada, in Quebec, the French-speaking province, there's another incentive there. So there are people who are giant stars in Quebec that sing in French, and I don't know. I have no idea who they are. I mean, Celine Dion comes from that world, but there's a whole industry there. They just play in Quebec, and so some people are rich from doing that.
Is it hard? Is it arduous? Is it exhausting to go to somewhere like the US and really have that sort of step down in terms of, maybe like venue and crowd size?
No, and it's really not that much difference now. I mean, we when we play in Canada, we're able to get on more, festivals that make money, that pay better. But if we play we would play in Toronto, we would play which is where we live. We would play to 900 to 1,000 people. Like that would be as big a show as we do now, and that's great. But if we play in Detroit, we play to 600. That's getting up there. As the farther south you go, I'm buddies with Stephen Page, who used to be in the Bare Naked Ladies, and his joke about a touring Canadian band is you get to the border and you just put a suitcase of money on the top of the car, and then you just start driving south.
They made it here. I mean, they made it
Oh
here
yeah,
as much as about any Canadian band.
That's right. But I mean, not that we need to go into it, but he's no longer with Bare Naked Ladies. So, he doesn't have money like they do. Like they've got tons of money, those guys. They still make so much money.
But he was there for that.
He was,
It's one of those weird things where like they're a one-hit wonder here.
Right. But they have like 15 albums or something.
But he was around for that big moment for them.
Yes. And he's still like, he literally said, yeah, it's been like, that's like his whole life is that split second of like breathing. And
you've had hits relative to your broader catalog, but obviously, at least certainly not here in the States, not that sort of one really big.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's right.
It's a similar conversation about having success early on, whether or not having something that is that not just stratospheric, but stands out so much compared to the rest of your catalog, whether that's a blessing or a curse.
It is a curse because you try to like, even like here in a relative sense, our first big song on our first record was called Underwhelmed. And it was, people yelled, play Underwhelmed like for like 5 years. And to the point where we didn't play it anymore. Or we fought, and we would fight in turn. Like there's a push-pull in the band about artistry versus being an entertainer. It's like, do we give these people what they want, or do we say, fuck these people and we're just going to do what we want? I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle. But yeah, so if we had a song like 1 week or whatever, like that it's hard. It's hard to come back from that. I mean, I alluded earlier to when you have a record that's 10 years old, then 20 years old, and 25 years old, and it's people's favorite. Like it's harder and harder to compete with that because I was so young. I looked young and I looked great on the cover of that record. And the song came out when you were in university before you had kids and you're divorced and whatever. Like part of me wishes we had a big hit so I could retire. But we never made so much money that we could ever stop. That's the other thing. And I'm grateful in a way because I enjoy working. I enjoy all aspects of my life. I like coming home, but I like also going on tour, and I like recording, and I like writing. Like I'm a pretty lucky guy.
That dynamic that you described, the push pull, as you put it, between most simplistic terms, like pop versus art, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of thing that to some degree maintains within the band? Obviously, you guys know each other really well. You've been doing this for a long time. Is that kind of tension still there to some degree?
For sure. I would say that to polarize them, I would say that Patrick is an entertainer and Andrew is the artist, but they both have aspects of each other, of the opposite. But, Andrew would just say, he would literally go out and just randomly play songs and put no thought into it. And why should I? Like, I'm just going to, hey, that would be a good idea. He likes collage, and he likes just happenstance and mistakes and whatever. And Patrick is like, we have 14 songs that people know. Let's just go out and play those. And, I'm definitely on the side of let's keep making more records, even though the records that we've made, the reason we get hired to do anything that pays is because of songs that we've already written. And anything we write from now on, we're just competing with ourselves for the real estate in the set list. here's a new one. We made a new record in 2018, and we played 10 new songs in the set. Is that obnoxious, or is that a responsibility of a cult act to do, or is it just is it selfish behavior?
It's also something to some degree, if you're going to keep going, that you kind of have to be okay with all of that, because I talk to a lot of bands, a lot of indie bands, or they haven't been around for as long as Sloan. We're talking bands that formed in like the aughts, for example.
Yes.
And they're going through that thing right now where their audience has gotten older, and this is well before COVID. There were fewer and fewer people coming out to the shows, and they couldn't figure out if it was a matter of just their fan base getting older and maybe having kids and not coming out, or whether it was sort of waning success. Right. And I've had some like very like honest questions with them where they're wondering whether they can or should keep going.
Yeah. I think that when you say that that's happening now to a group from the aughts, I think it probably happened to us in the early 2000s. We had 5 records out. Our third and fourth records sold pretty well. They're gold records in Canada. And then our fifth record, Between the Bridges, came down and sold like a third or a quarter of what we had been selling. And that's Napster time. And kind of, there wasn't a lot of rock, it was Backstreet Boys. And I joked at the time that you had to either be in the Backstreet Boys or Britney Spears or in Korn. Like you had to be either an angel or a devil. Like there was no, like, where does Cheap Trick go? Where's AC/DC go?
It was such a weird time for popular music.
Yeah.
Everything was either new metal or like a manufactured pop group. It was really a bizarre time to try to navigate popular music.
Yeah, well, I would say that I don't think that we really changed much. We started recording on computer. I don't know what else we did that was different. We did it because it was cheaper.
That seems like a case where you couldn't have. There's no way anyone's going to buy Sloan as a new metal band, and like certainly they're not going to buy you as a boy band.
Right. Well, I've joked that we've always been kind of a variation on a boy band, in that I've always wanted us to be on the cover of our records. I've always tried to share the real estate of the set lists and the albums and the pictures, so that it's always the 4 of us. It's not, Counting Crows, or it's like, are there other people back there in the background? Like, it's just like, it's always the 4 of us. Like, Andrew Scott's name, even though he's the drummer or just in the background, but like, we've really taken great pains to, that's boy band stuff. Like, that's Beatles stuff. But, Beatles are a boy band, I guess.
I had heard you speak prior to everything that's gone on over the past year, and it sounded like I heard an interview that you did, and maybe want to say early 2020, when we didn't think that things were going to get as bad as they have gotten. And it sounded like you were planning a lot for the 30th anniversary, which I assume most or all of it has been derailed.
Yeah, I put up a picture. Yeah, so our band played our first show February 8th, 1991. I put up some video of that show on February 8th, 2021. But we haven't milked our 30th anniversary, even though technically this is the year. But I guess we still want to be able to milk that when we can exploit it at the risk of sounding gross or whatever. But we haven't really made too much of a fuss over our 30th anniversary. But next year is the 30th anniversary of our first record. I guess we could milk that.
Why did the TUNS record come out when it came out?
I would say that I had always poo-pooed the idea of side projects because I wanted all of our best material to be in Sloan. And, whether it was, we had friends called Eric's Trip that lived in Moncton, and there were 4 people in the band, and they all had side projects. And they were all kind of got more interesting than the band. But that was kind of my barometer or whatever. It's like, I don't want that to happen to us. But in 2015 or whatever, we were just chugging along and just not making as much money. Like, it used to be that we would make a certain salary draw, and then the band would kind of pay for our taxes. And then that year it was like, we don't have money for that this year. So it's just like, I need to make more money, and you can't can't begrudge me doing it. Anyway, so Matt Murphy is my good buddy, and Mike O'Neill, my good buddy. These are old friends of mine. I knew Matt actually since 1986. We just got together and we jammed out ideas, and we just thought we could write songs that way. Normally, like in Sloan, we don't jam. We all just kind of bring songs in. But with TUNS, we made up 50 jams, and then we listened to them and said, let's work up these 12. So I don't feel like they really took away from anyway, that's how I justified it anyway. It doesn't take away from my cache of songs. We just sort of like create songs out of midair. And it's fun and quick, and it's a trio, and I'm playing drums, and those are like two old friends of mine. And we don't have any of the same pressures of being in our plan A, and the sort of the pressures that go into running that. So yeah, TUNS is TUNS is my trio, and we put out a record in 2016, and it's just called it's just a self-titled record called TUNS. And I look back on it, and it was 2016, and I really wish we had called it 16 Tons. Really blew an opportunity there.
You gotta wait another 100 years for that one to come around.
Yeah. And we just put out a record just a couple of months ago called Duly Noted.
Actually, I take it back. You just need to release 14 more records.
Very, very good. You're right. Exactly right. Or a 16 song record, maybe even.
You hedge your bets. When you and I were talking and setting up this interview, I assume like somewhat joked about not having anything on your calendar. Was this a matter of just like realizing that, hey, there's going to be this big gap in our ability to do anything with Sloan, so this is the time to focus on the side project again?
No, the record came out in 2016, and we were all gung-ho, and it was really quick and easy to do. But then Matt moved to the UK and took a job over there, and then both of those guys have had kids late in life. Those like guys like Mike's almost 50, Matt's 50, but they both have like little babies, so they're both kind of in the weeds.
Not unusual for rock musicians.
No. And it's, I had mine relatively late. My kids are 13 and 10. I'm 52. But, those guys are, 50 with like brand new kids, like COVID baby. But anyway, no, we had TUNS was on track to do it. I wanted it to come out at the end of 2020. Matt was back from the UK, and, COVID slowed it down. It would have come out a little bit earlier, the fall of last year. But Matt's back from the UK now. But then, so pandemic, so it's hard for us to do anything else. But I think we have some shows we're going to do in December with those guys, so that'll be fun.
Have you been able to do any songwriting in the meantime?
I've been doing a lot of kind of looking at what I have for songs. My problem is writing lyrics. I've got a whole bunch of kind of finished songs with melodies and chords and all that stuff, but it's just, I like my words to be good, but I never like doing it. It's the worst part, is sitting thinking I'm a poet, like sitting just writing in a journal like a goofball. But the other thing that I'm doing is like, we have our little Sloan owns a little boutique label kind of in name called Murder Records. And we've put out a couple Sloan records. We put out a couple Bsides comps. One just came out the other day. Bsides Volume 2. Bsides Volume 1 came out at the beginning of this year. We have a couple things I think that are going to come out at the end of this year. I put out a record by my friend who died a couple of years ago, a recording that I did with him from 1995. Gregory McDonald, who plays with Sloan on keyboards, he put out a record as Cola Wars. And we did the TUNS record. And we a lot of stuff coming out, small time stuff. No one's making much money, but it's fun hobby stuff to do.
Is it hard to motivate? Is it hard to be productive when it's not clear when there's going to be another Sloan record or tour? I mean, obviously, like, none of us knew how long this thing was going to last, but it was clear at a certain point that you weren't going to be out there playing live again next month. Yeah,
we've done these little B-sides records. We put the B-sides records out digitally before, like in 2013 or something, but we've just been doing vinyl versions of them as a kind of stopgap thing, just to show that we're still here and, selling. We make them limited edition, make 1,200 copies, makes us like $10,000 or something, but it just goes on the pile. I don't pocket that much money. We have to split it all. We started to make a 13th Sloan record last fall before we had to sort of shut it down. So I'd like to pick that up again. I've been writing emails about people's willingness to get together, and September might be the realistic next time that we all get together. I don't know, but I'm ready to go. I've sung 4 songs for that record. I probably won't need that many if everybody steps up and does their kind of 3 songs, but I'm willing to throw 4 songs on the record.
I was impressed with how not only how open you were about getting Bell's palsy, but you immediately had a picture of yourself. You and I discussed this a little bit before, but I dealt with this in late March, early April of last year. So I'm in Queens, and it was like really when COVID was really starting to hit New York City.
Yeah.
I compared the first several months of dealing with this to, do you know what sitting Shiva is in Judaism?
I do. Yes.
So part of sitting Shiva is that you cover all the mirrors.
Okay.
And there was just a period, I wouldn't do any Zoom calls with my coworkers, partially because I couldn't speak. I was having difficulty with plosives. So like P's and F's were getting caught right here. You had that picture of you and you were just like, hey, here's what's going on.
Well, I forget the timeline. I got it in January, and I feel like I didn't post about it until March, maybe. I don't remember exactly. But I did say, I put up, my wife was encouraging me to post about it. I didn't want to post about it because I was thinking, I don't have to be in the world. Maybe a couple of months from now, maybe I'll be better. And then I'm not going to want this picture to exist, and she encouraged me to say, she's like, you got 13,000 followers or something. It's like, take them on the journey. I mean, at some point you're going to have to admit that that's what's going on. And so why not you just come good with it? So I was nervous about it because I didn't want to get a bunch of sympathy. People, I didn't want a sort of full-time job of having to respond to people about how sorry they were or whatever. And I also didn't want to make it look like I had it any worse than anybody else who experienced these things, those kinds of things. And, I didn't want to be accused of, this, whatever it would be called, like the disaster capitalism equivalent of. Anyway, so I had this picture where I really felt like I looked like a melted candle, like it was really pretty severe looking. And I had something written, and I didn't have the heart to press send. I was like, am I gonna, or share or whatever? It's like, I don't know if I can do this. And my wife's just like, so I was like, okay. I
live alone, so maybe that's why I wasn't motivated in the same way.
Well, anyway, like it's fine. It was fine, but then it got picked up by the Canadian press. And then it was like in all these like newspapers. And then I had people calling me for comment. I was like, well, what am I going to say? Like, I'm not an expert. I don't know if I'm exactly doing it right. I went for a steroid shot the night that it happened. Like I noticed I couldn't spit in the sink. And then I went to the hospital and got a steroid shot. And I think that's what you're supposed to do. I feel pretty good now. Like it's been months and months. So I'm feeling pretty good. So anyway, so I was a little bit felt bad that like the most known picture of me now is this Bell's palsy picture. So I'm totally happy with mine. I'm totally like I was mostly just relieved that I didn't lose my hand. Like I was like, is this a stroke? Like, am I gonna lose my left hand and then I'm done? What can I do?
I think we were also in different boats because you live in Canada and I live in America, and I went to an urgent care around the corner again at the height of COVID. I don't know if I told this story on the podcast before, but I went to an urgent care. I walked in, I had my mask on. So I took my mask off and he looked at it and he was like, that's Bell's palsy. And he tells me a little bit about it. And he says, are you scared? And I said, well, yeah, I guess so. And he says, well, good, you should be. And then he proceeds to tell me that 20 to 30% of people never fully recover.
What?
It was the worst bedside manner that I've ever dealt with any doctor. I think it's partially because of the American healthcare system, but partially because, again, Queens was the highest number of COVID cases in the entire world at the time.
Right.
I still haven't fully recovered. It's been a year and change now. And I guess at some point I kind of had to come to grips with like, yeah, maybe it won't ever be entirely better. And, and I can still.
Did you get a steroid shot or pill or whatever? A pill?
You put me on steroid pills. Yeah. And it helped. It was slow. You and I talked a little bit about acupuncture. I did that too. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that was, I mean, it certainly wasn't a magic bullet.
Yeah, I was literally doing it so that to deal with people who were going to say told you so if I told them that I hadn't done it and then I hadn't recovered. And they'd be saying, "Well, you should have tried, you should have done." It just I didn't want to hear it, and I didn't want to have people to have to say it, that I should have done this or that. Anyway, did I tell you my other story again with the Stephen Page? He's my buddy. I was complaining to him that this was now the most known picture of me, and then he sent me a picture of his mugshot because he's like, "This is the most known picture of me," and then my joke to that was, "Yeah, but you never look better than that, than your mugshot." That's my joke.
One of the things I'm thinking about a lot, and this is COVID too. This is the Bell's palsy. This is the fact that and like a bunch of other things were happening at the same time. We're all hoping that at the very least we come out of this past year, I don't know, having learned something about ourselves, having better, perspective on us or the world, hopefully going through this trauma to some degree, we can come out the other ends better for it. Having dealt with that on top of everything else, do you feel like you've learned anything about yourself? Do you feel like you've taken any sort of, I don't know, lessons away from the experience?
I don't know. I'm not wise. The worst thing that's happened for us is that we had the video games kind of locked down with the kids, and now with COVID, like the arse is out of her, as it were. Like the kids they're never off the video games. That's the only way they interact with their friends, and I just think their imaginations have been destroyed or something. Like it's like when they're off screens, they're just like, "What do I do now? Like this sucks." And so I really regret that has happened. We kind of just like with the online school and the video games and then the playing with their friends online, like there's just whatever, it's just kind of a shame. But I don't know, I haven't learned, I don't have a good sage remark for you. Like we know, like when this happened, Sloan had done a bunch of touring, and we do a lot of touring, then we take time off, so we were really lucky that we kind of like filled the coffers basically as much as we ever have them by March of that year. And so we've been kind of living off it. So, if it goes on a lot longer, we're going to run out of money, and then we'll see what happens. But I haven't been that adversely affected by it, except for the Bell's palsy, which is a coincidence. I don't want to. I think it's comes off as crass or whatever to say that I've enjoyed myself, because a lot of people have been like so compromised. But I'm lucky. We're just homebodies, and we're home all the time, and I'm with my wife and the kids, and we're an intact family, and I'm super lucky. I mean, I guess I've realized that yet again, like I've spent my whole life thinking about how lucky I've been, and it's just I'm just lucky again. I'm just fortunate about my lot in life. I'm lucky.
I mean, I guess I would ask this of most people, but not you necessarily. I would ask if it's given you gratitude, if it's made you more grateful, being able to sort of like step away from it and view your career from afar to a certain degree. But I don't know, you don't strike me as somebody who ever really took it for granted.
I don't think that I have. Yeah, hopefully not. I think that taking things for granted is a shame. Like I don't believe in God or any of those things, but I was raised Catholic, and I think maybe some of those things were instilled in me as a young Catholic kid. But I definitely feel lucky, and but I feel like I want to think that I spend my whole life thinking that way. It's funny. My kid is 13. My older kid is 13, and he's a musician, and he's way better musician than I am. And I always talk about how lucky I am, and he sort of let fly that he found it really discouraging for me to say how lucky I've been, because he's like, well then what will my life be like if you were just lucky? Like, who cares that I tell him how good he is or whatever as a musician. He's like, well, who cares? You were just lucky. I was like, okay, well, we worked hard too. You need luck and hard work.
Yeah, of course. And you're encouraging. I mean, he's 13, so he's not quite at the point where he's making like major life career decisions, but you're encouraging of that.
Of course I am, but like, no, I have to hold back all my enthusiasm for his musical interests because I just look like he just jokes, makes fun of me for being like this, like showbiz dad or whatever. He's awesome. He's so good, but he's so self-conscious. I can't take a picture of him. I can't video him playing drums or piano or whatever, but he's so good.
I know that obviously there was at least one point in the band where the band ostensibly or maybe unofficially broke up, due to myriad reasons. But beyond that, has it always been a given that there's always going to be a new record, that there's always going to be another tour?
I think so. Like, I think that we definitely talked about what is the value of new music versus, not that we can do this experiment, but, had we stopped playing in 1999 or 98 and then came back now, would we be millionaires? Would we be playing, would our, have we just done damage to our reputation because, we went and got old and all those things, the Rolling Stones, like how interesting are their records after Tattoo You, and we're a lot older than they were on Tattoo You, although I think that was probably still their 12th album or something. But, they made so many records so quickly. But I often compare us to the Rolling Stones, not obviously not for cultural impact, but just as an example of somebody who's still trying to do it. And, if you're the Rolling Stones, you're talking about the idea of the curse or of having a hit. They've got a set list that if they have a new record and they add 10 new songs, like it's just a travesty. Like you can't, how many of those can you take out of the set? And I'd like to think that we have some songs that people want to hear. I want that to be true, but I also want them to put, when we play now, like it's been about 10 years or so that we don't have opening acts anymore. We just play an evening with, as it were, and we play 2 sets because, we all take turns singing. So in the course of a night, like I'll get 5 songs or 6 songs. So if I play, I probably have 4 songs that I probably should play every time, but I like to play at least 2 of them. And then there are some from the new record. And then there are some that if some people have seen us, I think we're a kind of a cult act. So like some people have seen us 40, 50 times. So like, I like to have some that are just like way out of rotation that we can just pull out of a hat. So we have to play for 2 sets in order to get all that kind of stuff in.